Let's have some frank conversation today about preventing suicide. This is what families need to know. I'm going to share some facts with you first that might surprise you. They can be a little bit alarming, but then let's talk about some of the practical things that we can do as families to hopefully prevent some of the preventable tragedies that have been plaguing our world. Let's start you out with some key facts that are provided by the World Health Organization. If you forget that, just ask who? Yeah, WHO, World Health Organization, who have compiled statistics for suicide and other major health concerns across the world. The World Health Organization reports that over 800,000 people every year die from suicide. Wrap your head around that for a minute. That's just under 1 million people every year. And for every person who dies from suicide, there are many, many more who make a suicide attempt or who have suicidal thoughts or ideation. The numbers explode from there. And the biggest predictive factor of someone dying from suicide is that they have had a previous attempt. So that makes the people at risk a huge number. The World Health Organization also reports that suicide is the third leading cause of death for 15 to 19-year-olds. It's also the third leading cause of death worldwide when you group all of the diseases together as number one and accidental death as number two. But for young people, 15 to 19, the diseases aren't as big of a factor in terms of a cause of death, and suicide takes the number 3 spot. Almost 80% of suicides globally occur in economies or countries that are lower to middle income. That tells us where to focus some of our attentions. Now let's get into the psychology. The most predominant emotional component of suicidal thoughts or behavior is hopelessness. Watching out for hopelessness can give us some of the early warning signs that might come up in our families or among people that we know and love. So we want to watch out for that. And at the same time, I think we work actively on cultivating a culture of hope within our families and our communities. This is best done through positivity. One of the biggest reasons that we launched this channel, Live on Purpose TV, is to instill that culture. If you have not yet subscribed to this channel, would you please do so? Take a moment to click on that subscribe button and let's share it with other people as well to create a culture of hope and positivity. That can be one of the most powerful preventative factors that we could possibly do. Communication is probably one of the most important preventative actions that we can take, especially with our loved ones, to open up those lines of communication. Let them know, send a strong message that they can talk with you about this. And it's important for us to have the courage to have the hard conversations and to initiate those. If you see that one of your loved ones or someone that you know is struggling with feelings of hopelessness or depression or desperation, if they've experienced some kind of a loss, if you know that they have a previous suicidal attempt, these are all risk factors that should trigger our willingness to intervene. And here's what you can do. Simply ask the hard question. Have you been thinking about ending your own life? Okay, you can ask that. I would suggest that you don't alter the wording to be, have you been thinking about hurting yourself? Because that's not what they're thinking of doing. Someone who wants to end their life is doing so to end the pain. They're not trying to hurt themselves. They're trying to make things better. Now, you probably don't agree that that would make things better, but this is part of the thinking that leads to suicidal behavior. So instead of asking, are you thinking of hurting yourself? Simply ask, have you had thoughts of suicide? Or are you thinking about ending your own life? It's okay to ask. And don't worry about putting the idea in their head. They probably have already thought about it. And those who haven't will appreciate that you asked, and they will confirm that, no, they haven't thought of that. But the ones who do need to have the question. And a lot of times people in that position are not really willing to or even know how to reach out for help. I had a conversation recently on my podcast with Lark Galley. She wrote a book called Learning to Breathe Again after experiencing the suicide of her father, and not too long after that, her son. Wow, what a heavy load that is. Lark was so generous in sharing with me her thoughts about what we can do in terms of prevention. And I've collected a number of conversations that I put together with her and some other amazing resources, people who are willing to talk about this at Live on Purpose Central. And I'll tell you more about that as we get to the end of this video. There are resources available to you. And I am so grateful for people like Lark Dean Galley, who is willing to share her experience. Along those lines, communication, let's watch our language. This is something that a lot of people aren't even aware of. You'll notice throughout the course of this video and any others that I've done on the topic of suicide, I never use the word committed. Now, it's traditional and probably a destructive tradition to use that word. It creates an unnecessary burden for those who are dealing with a loved one who has died by suicide. So you'll notice that I use terms like died by suicide, or ended their own life, or took their own life. These are more acceptable terms that we can use that don't have the same stigmas that are attached to the word committed. We need to get away from some of the taboos about suicide and about talking about it. It's a prominent enough problem that we need to look at our language and use language that is sensitive to those who are affected. Not only does this help us to interact with those who have lost someone tragically to suicide, but it also opens up the conversation with those who are having thoughts. And it lessens the stigma or the taboo around having suicidal thoughts. It is so common, maybe at times universal. Let's open up the conversation and be able to talk about anything. Now let's get really practical. Some suicidal behavior occurs on an impulse after some kind of a loss. So someone loses a relationship or a job or something that's very important to them. That can sometimes trigger suicidal behavior. It's usually not the only precipitating cause, but to get very practical about this, we can prevent a number of suicides simply by eliminating or removing the means. Some suicides occur by firearms. What are we doing to secure our firearms? People, let's just be smart about that. Secure those firearms, especially if there are young people in the home, and especially if there's anyone around who has precipitating risk factors. I know of a family that I worked with last year where the person who was struggling with the suicidal thoughts and intentions was the person who owned all of the firearms. And they had to have some hard conversations in that family about, hey, until you're feeling more stable, until everybody is safe, we're going to remove those from the home. They relocated them to a different location and engaged some extended family to help with securing that particular means of suicide. Think of what other means might be readily available that you could secure. Poisons or toxins, some of the things that could harm someone significantly or be used in a suicide attempt. There are a number of suicides that could be prevented if we were just a little more careful. Thank you for watching clear to the end of this video. It shows how much you care about this important problem. Would you please share this video with someone who needs to have this information? And if you or someone that you know is in trouble currently, please use your local resources. You can always dial 911 or call your local suicide helpline. There are many resources available to you. I want you to know you're not alone, and we've got your back.